Alrighty, well, thanks everyone for coming. Today I'm going to talk about the journey to DevSecOps. So before we actually start, can I just do a quick poll on how many of you are doing DevOps already? Oh, just a few. That's a shame. You should have been better at that. I hope that you're gonna, have some nice takeaways on how to get to DevSecOps. I'm gonna explain what that is, and yeah, that might be better if we just get started. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is what DevSecOps is. Then we're gonna do a quick sanity check. I'll give you away a few quick wins of how you can, improve some things with a few clicks here and there. And then I'm going to explain how SEC, which stands for security, fits in the DevOps cycle. I reckon by now most of you already know me, but for those who don't, my name is Danijel Malik. I am a Microsoft MVP for Visual Studio ALM. That's what I still call it, even though we kind of fit in under the big umbrella. I work as a solution architect at SSW. I do various things here. But I really love everything about DevOps, in particular about VSTS and TFS, and I've been doing a lot of work in Azure for the last year or so. So that's kind of a bit about my background. This is where I come from. It's a nice small country. Speaking about Donald that Adam just gave in the news. I can't say really that I'm proud, but Melania, who's his wife, she comes from the same country, only that she betrayed us. She changed her last name to be Knaus. It's like Austrian one. It's not, initially she was with V, and then she changed it to U. So that's so much about, his wife was Dodge, and now he's here as well. Alrighty. So speaking about DevOps, we have developers on one side, and then we have operations on one side. And if you bring them together, you get something like this. So developers, are interested in creating, stuff, and then eventually handing it over to operations. Now, one bit that is really missing in here is security. And where would that fit in? That's kind of the purpose of that talk, how we actually make security fit into that space. Okay? There are a few other movements around, like Rugged DevOps, and a few others. And if you go to their page, ruggedsoftware.org, you can read that manifesto. It's a really simple one. I think it's 10 or whatever paragraphs we have here. They're very simple. Like Rugged DevOps focuses a lot on the code perspective. DevSecOps probably more about on the tools, but they're both very similar movements. So if you just look at the first, paragraph, it says, I am rugged, and more importantly, my code is rugged. So whatever I ship out has to be, toughened, if we can say so. But if you look at, at Google Trends, and you just compare, DevSecOps against any other term, I think DevSecOps is the one that is actually going to win on the long run. It's getting more traction than anything else, and in principle, everything is the same. It's just, this is what you're going to hear a lot about in the next few years. That's my bet. Okay, let's do a quick sanity check. We're going to start with something, this talk is primarily designed around web apps or web development, and it has foundations a lot in Azure and in BSTS. So how many of you are actually, building web apps? About half the room. Yeah, that's not bad. How many are you using Azure? Same thing. Okay. So with web apps, let's have a look at what you have in terms of authentication. So you have forms-based, then you have basic, you have Windows authentication, token-based, multi-factor, fingerprint scanning, one-time passwords, smart cards, you name it. So out of these, let's start with the first one. Who's using form-based authentication? So a user comes to your website and he has to enter username and password. Who's using that? Okay, vast majority. Basic authentication? Yeah, only a few. What about Windows authentication? Wow, I'm surprised that so many are still using Windows authentication. Is that in conjunction with web apps? No, okay, fine. That makes sense, because I don't see many websites these days that are actually using Windows authentication unless it's internal team. Token based, this is probably the most popular one. Yep, good. MFA, who's using MFA? Oh, a few, but that's coming. It's becoming a big trend now.
Two-phased authentication?
Yes, that's right. MFA stands for multi-factor, so that means that when you type in username and password, you might get a notification on your mobile with a code, or you have to use an app or something like that. Fingerprint scanning. Well, I'll tell you what, we have a really super modern office, and we have a fingerprint scanner that lets you... Well, it works for some people, you know. I think, Adam, you'll have to spend more money on it, but it's a good thing. I really like what we've done. Smart cards. This is probably... Oh, there we go. Stan's having it. I see that, you know, a lot with the blue badges. Huh? Say that again?
Where you're at? At your client's
At the bank.
At the bank, yes, we do use smart cards. Actually, we're using phone apps, and they change it like every couple of months. I don't know why, but they must have a reason. But they change it a lot. And obviously, one-time passwords. This is, you know, popular on mobile apps, or even some apps. You know, they will send you a link, and you will click on that one, and it will log you in. I think Slack gives you that option, so that you don't have to type in username and password. They just send you a link, and then you authenticate against.
And also medium.com, every time you go there, you can't just type in a password. It sends you a one-time link. You click the link and then you're in.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that one. But yeah, these are kind of the options in terms of authentication. Is there anything that I have missed? Like, by the way, who knows what's the difference between authentication and authorization? Because that's the next thing that comes up. Oh. Okay. Costa, what's the difference?
Basically...
Wait for the mic.
Yeah, when you do authorization, you just tell what the user can do, and with authentication is like first step. You just try to understand who is this guy who is trying to like get access to your resource.
Brilliant, perfect. Before I actually jump to authorization, Costa explained really well what the difference is. So just to paraphrase, authentication is about saying, who are you? Authorization is, what can you do? If you were to start a new greenfield project, which one of these would you use? Adam.
Auth0.
Auth0, okay. What would you use, Costa?
I don't think so.
There we go. So it's because you have seen the stars before?
Huh?
No? Okay.
Actually, like I used it a couple of times and I kind of like it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so that would be my bet. Like, you know, everything is moving towards the token-based authentication. I'm not going to say it's going to be 100%, but, you know, vast majority of the projects would use that. They both give you, you know, nice options of what you can do with your web apps, or even something else. Yeah, so that would be my bets, you know, if I was to start a new greenfield project. So let's go to authorization now. So what types of authorizations do we have? Okay, I'll give you a clue. So the first one is claim-based. And you have actually a couple of options in that space. So you can say, as a user, I have those claims. Or even if you want to be a bit more secure, you can have device-based claims. That's what I've seen at Microsoft. So you have to use a specific device, and that device actually has a claim that, you know, when you log in via that device, you actually get a kind of a combined set, and that lets you, you know, do certain things. If you use a different device, those claims are missing, and it will block you from doing those things. So that's how far you can get. So that's probably, you know, what has been popular for the last few years. A more common one is probably role-based access control. This is like, you know, I'm a reader, contributor, or whatever. And based on that, you know, based on what group you're in or what role, you actually have certain permission to do certain things. Anything to add here? Okay, William?
I think you can use policy as well.
Policy-based authorization.
Yeah. So you can use policy to describe like different policy for different like actions users can do.
How would that work with? So you're saying you would apply a policy to a user?
Yeah, you basically define some policies and then say which user or which role can use those policies. Like give you a more flexible way to do that.
I hear what you're saying, but doesn't that kind of fit in under either claims or roles? You're not applying role policies on specific user. You can say that person has a claim that enables certain things, but if you're applying a policy, then it's kind of role-based thing. Is it about the same thing we're talking?
Yeah, it could be, but role like you are administrator, right? But I would say administrator can do, can do security check or can create a user account. So different policy can describe actually different thing, like a particular job. Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm still trying to understand how's that different from the role-based thing. This actually is from the. Recently I played with the .NET Core, the authentication part that allows you to create your own policies is to do those kind of particular things.
Oh, I see where you're coming from. So those policies in .NET Core, they're actually in the back. Yeah, they can hide, claims-based or role-based authentication. So you define in a policy, you define what exactly should happen, but that information has to come from the authorization already. So those policies are, how to explain that in a simple way?
Yeah, so basically you define the policy based on user roles or claims. So yeah, it's just a simpler way to combine all together and so to make them reusable instead of, for example, each time given a list of roles. So basically it's almost the same thing as roles and claims.
It is just a combination of both. Yeah. That's right, yeah, but it's an abstraction. So authorization mechanism underneath is still, the same, even though you're kind of, you're wrapping everything around that. Yeah? Alrighty. What about data cleansing? So what types of, data cleansing do we know? Well, first one is validation and sanitization. Is that how you pronounce it? Well, I'll put it this way, validate and sanitize inputs. Who knows why that is good? Okay, the problem is, if you don't do any validation, you're exposing yourself to SQL injection attacks. So even if you're using Entity Framework Core, which you're probably using all by now, you still have an option to execute SQL statements on the fly. And if you're concatenating strings on the as you go, that's where your vulnerability lies, and you can get hacked easily with a SQL injection. That's why that validation is so important. Now the other problem is the outputs, right? So if you don't sanitize outputs, then you get yourself exposed to cross-site scripting. So let's say that in my name field I just enter some JavaScript, and because if I don't sanitize that on the way out, I just render it as what was in the database, I all of a sudden exposed all my users to cross-site scripting by someone else. And those are just two simple things. Another one that is probably becoming quite interesting is user uploads. So when you allow users to save zip files or anything, you don't really know what is in there. So you kind of have to have virus scanner in there. If you store the whole thing in a database, it can get dangerous. So careful with that one too. Okay. Moving on. What about data protection? We have a few options here. So we have hashing, which is one-way function. So all passwords or whatever you use, that's where you would use hashing. If you want to encrypt sensitive data, then encryption is a two-way function, and you normally do it either using certificate or some mechanism that you can kind of reverse the whole thing. Then obviously we have some password policies in that space. Predominantly I'm thinking here about complexity, expiration, and enforced secret rotation. Who's using any of that? Okay, half the room. What about session policies? So there's an interesting thing in that space. Your policy, if you become inactive, you can say, oh, you haven't done anything in the last 10 minutes, your session is going to expire if you don't start clicking around. That's what the expiration would be on the session policy. Remember me is a tricky one, because everyone likes to be logged in as long as possible, but at some point you have to expire that session, otherwise you're kind of exposing yourself to a hack through that one. Actually, I've seen people pushing their cookies in GitHub, you know, so they have them like a backup in there. And obviously GitHub is open to everyone, right? So you can just go and pull down those cookies, and you can log in as someone else, you know, just by using their cookies. So that's where Remember Me can actually get quite tricky. There are other things like, you know, token policies. I think this is an example, yeah. If the session expires, but the token is still valid, so the token is in a cookie. So if the session says, okay, your time ran out, but it doesn't log you out, your cookie stays valid. So next time you open the whole thing, it brings it up. But if your cookie gets exposed, you're in trouble. What about website protection? So we use, who's using HTTPS? Vast majority. What about HSTS? I didn't put it up here. No? HSTS? Okay, I'll give you a clue. HSTS. So strict transport security. No? It's all about, hold on, where's that bit? Yeah, I can't see it. But anyway, one of the guys mentioned that a few weeks ago. I had a quick look at that one. It's not very common, that's why I didn't put it in the slides. But some people are very pro about that one. It might be interesting in reading that link from Wikipedia. Moving on. So actually, I put it in the slides. Thought I didn't. What about content security policies? Like, you know, what you can do on the website? No. Okay. Maybe have a look into those things. It's not very, you know, common among developers from what I've seen, but it's something that I'm very interested in. What about config transformations? Do you use different configs for different web environments? Yeah. Okay, great. What about debug mode? Do you disable that? Yeah? Okay, good. A couple of other things, you know, setting the headers. So that's how you prevent, you know, cross-site scripting, and, you know, what you can do with different things. So x-headers, that's definitely something to look into. One interesting thing that doesn't really fit under the headers section, it should have been out here. A lot of guys, especially now, if you're developing an application that, you know, accepts plugins, if you don't, you know, work out, you know, those headers and what you can do with them, you expose yourself to cross-site scripting, to crypto mining. And what people do these days, when you open a website, some JavaScript gets loaded into your browser, and that whole thing is doing, you know, coin mining. And as a result, you know, your CPU, your power, or whatever that is actually making someone else's money. There are pages like, you know, I know that BitTorrent pages are doing that because I read some articles on that, not because I'm downloading torrents, but that there are some cases where people actually use that in a good purpose. Like, you know, imagine visiting a page and it's full of ads, and you take those ads away for the sake of, you know, doing some coin mining for someone else. So that's kind of a nice trade-off, right? But obviously it keeps running your CPU pretty high. So if you start hearing, you know, some weird sound from under your computer, that's probably doing that, you know, some coining mine. If you want to get a full security list, we are adding some of our stuff. That's why we have a to-do there. But that link will take you to a page that is full of security checks. If you want to, you know, it's up to you what you want to really implement. I'm going to tweet the slide deck after the session, so no need to take the pictures. So that's kind of about the quick check, you know, what you should be doing if you're doing any web development. I'll give you a few quick wins of how you can improve security in your web apps and in database spaces as we go. So the first one is monitoring. Who's using monitoring these days? Yeah. I wish, you know, there were more hands, but anyway.
What kind of monitors?
So I'll put it this way. How do you know what's happening with your application?
If I'm using
Azure,
yeah, if I'm using Azure, they have this, you know, Azure insights.
App Insights, yes.
Yeah, so they provide quite a good information, like all kind of information. That
Okay, that's exactly what I'm
yeah.
talking about. Yeah, that type of monitoring. So doesn't matter what you use. You have App Insights. You have Raygun gives you Pulse. There's New Relic. You know, you name it. There are many of them. But the thing is, you know, the bottom line is you need to know what's going on with your app. No excuses, and that's where you put monitoring in place. That's like the bottom line. Then you will understand what exactly, you know, if exceptions are being thrown, or if someone is trying to do denial of service attacks on you, you'll see, you know, that the availability goes down or the requests are failing, those type of things, you know. Simply, it's like, you know, doing a health check every now and then. And it's much more than just exceptions. Like you're gonna see a lot of things in there, you know, how CPU is going up and down, what's the RAM, how many requests are failing, and so forth. So this is how you do it. It's just a few steps, you know. If you're using Azure, it's not really hard. You go to Monitoring plus Management in Azure. Once you click the plus button, then you choose Application Insights, and then you fill in whatever is needed, like, you know, the name, the application type. So you have a few options to choose from. It's not just web applications. It gives you, like, you know, full stack and a few other things. Then obviously subscription. Choose location. You have, I think, 5 or 6 locations at disposal, and then you hit create, and that's it. So if you're using VSTS, it's really simple to set the whole thing up. You go to release and you create a new definition, and then there's a pre-created template for you. So all you have to do is choose Azure App Service Deployment with continuous monitoring, and that's going to give you a template, you know, with 3 tasks, which one enables the whole thing on the website. The other one specifies what exactly you're going to run, and obviously you deploy the application. That's how easy it is. So once you fill in all these parameters, this is what I did in my case, the whole thing is set up. All you have to do is to save and create a release, and bam, off you go. These are the alert rules you get by default. So it'll notify you if availability goes below a certain percentage, or if failed requests start, you know, coming up, or if the response time is slow, and those type of things. So that's what you get, like, you know, with a few clicks straight away for your web application. Who finds that useful? Yeah, most. Great. Next thing, you know, again, it's mostly about Azure. It's Azure Security Center. So the question for you, how do you know when bad things are really happening? Like Stan, you're a sysadmin. How do you know what's happening to your environment?
I just wait for someone to give me a call.
Oh, okay.
Good
choice, Stan.
We've got a few tools that we use, you know, like you mentioned before about App Insights. So we have quite a few applications in AWS. So we use some of their monitoring tools, and also we use Pingdom to see what websites are up and running. If they go offline, we get a notification to say, you know, this site is offline. And also with Datadogs, we get a lot of matrices that we measure against. Datadog is sort of like a network monitoring tool. So it's similar to like PRTG.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it gives you a CPU usage, you know, RAM usage, and disk space, and that sort of things.
What's the closest Microsoft tool?
No?
SCCM, SCOM, SCOM.
Oh, okay, yeah, System Center
Operation Manager. Yeah.
I think this is kind of, you know, SCOM on steroids. What do you get here? It's the one place to look for issues. I'll show you what exactly you can do there. There are tons of options what you can explore. I'll show you predominantly what you can do around the data, because there are a few clicks that, you know, you want to do to prevent some bad things from there. So one is to enable auditing and threat detection on Azure SQL Server. Sorry, on Azure SQL, not a SQL Server. The other one is, you know, enable vulnerability assessment on the databases. So here's what you see when you open up a security center. So you see how many events we had. We had a lot of things, you know, pumping data through to security center. I have a few options to look into. This is the development environment. There's a lot going on. So imagine, you know, how much would be there for a production system. What I'm going to do, I'm going to, you know, just have a quick look at what's in compute, but then I'm going to go to storage and data, okay? So with the compute, you see, straight away that there are some health problems there that, I don't know if I'd be interested here in missing system updates. I would go in there, I would drill into, and I would look, at different scenarios. I recommend that you go and you look, explore the whole thing by yourself. I'll show you something really quick now. So if you look at the storage and data, it looks pretty healthy, but there are some issues there. And one is like, server auditing and threat detection is not enabled on a server, and then, database auditing is not enabled. And TD, like, the encryption and so forth, that's still missing out. So what I can do from this view, I can choose my database. I can see that there's one thing that, is recommended to turn on, the other one is fine. So I drill into that one. This is my recommendation. And then I choose the SQL server. If there are many databases, I'll see that as well. It's recommended to enable the whole thing on the server. It costs $15 a month, and you'll see how you get a few really nice goodies from there. Once you do that, you enable auditing here. Then you enable threat detection. And by default, it'll give you an option to enable everything, which in fact is SQL injection and SQL injection vulnerability detection and anomalous client login. So this is what happens when you enable that. You get an email like this one, and then you click on the view recent SQL alerts, and that opens up the Azure page where you see potential SQL injection. So when you click on that one, it will give you exactly what happened there. So you see a statement here, select star from databases where database ID like blah blah blah. So that will expose the list of databases straight away, and there's a comment here where is a dash dash, so it commented out the whole thing, and SQL recognized that as a SQL injection, because normally you wouldn't execute a query like that. So you would get that straight into your inbox. How many find this thing very useful? Yeah, that's great. I think it's a brilliant thing, because with most applications these days, you would use Entity Framework Core or whatever you're going to use. It's quite secure. But on the old databases that you're moving in the cloud, or all applications, where there's a lot of ADO.NET, you would get quite exposed and you wouldn't know that. And when you turn the whole thing on, yeah, it might be like a Christmas tree. Things will start flying in. The other one that is kind of nice, and that's still a feature in preview, is a vulnerability assessment on the database itself. So all you have to do, you go to your database, you choose that vulnerability assessment, and from there on you just choose what storage account you want to use. You can select one from the list, or you can type the name up there and then you hit OK. And once you do that, you go back to that same screen. So the first time is the configuration, and then you hit the scan, and wrong animation. And then this is what you get. Sorry, one back. I think that I put the wrong screenshot up there. So this shows me the list of, I'll show you that in browser. If I go to my database, so this is my vulnerability assessment. This is pre-cached now. You can see that I have 3 failed things, and it tells me that DBO users should not be used for normal service operations. So pretty much use a different schema, different type of things. And these are the ones. They have 40 checks. And this is what exactly they have executed against my database, and it came back as a success. Definitely a valuable thing, in my opinion. Who finds that great? Yeah, great. Alrighty, let's move on. Okay, what about your secrets? Where do you keep them? So, a question for you, Stan, again. Where do you keep your secrets? Oh, there we go. The right answer. So One option would be, to keep the whole thing in your deployment tool of choice. I don't care what you use, as long as you have the ability to put the information there. VSTS, Octopus, a few other tools, they enable you that. There is a slight problem with it, right? So with any of those tools, you have two scenarios. Either the secret is entrusted to you, so you kind of know what the password is for a certain account and you're not supposed to, or you have to have sysadmin to enter the whole thing in for you. One way or the other, none of them is great. So here's an alternative. If you're using Azure Key Vault, does anyone use that? Oh, a bit disappointing, but you should have, and I'll show you why. The whole thing works with VSTS very nicely. So if you look at the process, how you deploy the application, you care about, deploying it, not about how the secrets fly in. And the sysadmin doesn't care about how you work it, what's your process, but he cares about the secrets. So let's have a look at how we can, bring the two of them together in a nice way. Well, these are just a few examples of VSTS release variables. So you see that I have some variables here, and I can use them to transform my config files or whatever I want. Same thing in Octopus, just a bit different screen. Okay, so let's get the scenario of how you work, with Key Vault and VSTS sorted out. So first of all, you have to create a Key Vault. So you go to Azure again. Under Security plus Identity, you select, Key Vault. Then you fill in the information that's required. It's not much really that you have to fill in. You hit Create, and you're kind of almost done. So the next thing is you have to go to dev.key vault. This is what you do, Stan. Okay. You go to secrets, and you say, okay, generate a secret. By default, it's going to be manual. You just type in what secret that is, and you put in that value. This is how you are not telling me where your secrets are, okay? So once you do that, you create that secret. You're going to see a message popping up there, and that secret is now secure. Even if you recreate another one, or if you generate a new secret, it keeps a historical log of them, and you can set the expiration dates and a few other things. It's incredibly powerful, and on top of that, it's really cheap. I think it costs a few cents a month. Okay, so once you have that sorted out, then we go to the developer side of things. So what they care about is how they're going to go use those secrets now in their application, and this is how you do it. You go and you create, so under the build and release, you create a new variable group. Okay, so under libraries, you create a new variable group. And with that variable group, you have a switch there, which says link secrets from an Azure Key Vault as variables. You choose your subscription, you choose your Key Vault account, and then you go and you choose add. And when you do that, well, it might ask you, to authorize the account. In this case, the account was already authorized. That's why I can add them. Otherwise, you just authorize the whole thing. And then I'm allowed to choose all those secrets that are in Key Vault and bring them in as variables in VSTS. And they don't get exposed, so there's no concern about that thing. So now I have those variables in my VSTS, and all I have to do is to save the library and go back and just choose what environment do I actually want to use those secrets. So I created that library. Now I'm going to create a release definition, and in the release definition I have to choose variable groups, and I have to link it to whatever I just created. And then I choose, do I want to use that across the entire process, or do I want to use it just in a specific environment? Okay. So when you do that, this is what you see there. So those variables are now flying through to your release definition, and that's how I use them. So let's have a look at this example. I have a connection string here in my process, and you see I have a server, and there is like $, and in parentheses I have server. That information is coming from down here. Okay? But when I look a bit forward, there's a SQL Server username and SQL Server password, and that's not coming from any of the variables that I have defined here. But because I linked it before with with VSTS, in the variable groups, that's what is actually flying in here, and that's how I generate SQL Server connection string on the fly without knowing any of the secrets. Who thinks that that is a brilliant thing? I absolutely love that. We use that at CBA a lot. I think it's a gold standard for everyone else.
Is there any
back one?
Yes.
Is there any way to use it?
Can you use the mic? Can you just pass it on?
Like, is there any way to use this like during development, like to attach such variables into your like Visual Studio?
Okay, so the question was, is there a way to use Key Vault with Visual Studio? A counter question, why would you do that?
Like basically, for example, if you like have some development database and you want to do some development obviously in Visual Studio, so where do you keep your secrets for like development environment while you do development?
Well, certainly you can spin up another instance of Key Vault, and if you want to really put it in there, there's no problem. Like the whole thing costs nothing. If you want to keep it so secure. But in development environment, I don't really see a scenario unless you're integrating with a service that you cannot expose the secrets to someone else. You can. Let me put the question this way: do you want to link your code to VSTS so that it would dynamically grab? To Azure Key Vault, they would dynamically grab the secrets and use them as needed.
No, like the question is like, can I just link it to like some tools that I use for development, for example, Visual Studio, not to type passwords there, like not to have it locally on my machine and to.
My recommendation would be create a separate Key Vault account, even in your own subscription or wherever you have to, and put the secrets there if you want to use it in development, unless you want to share it with someone else. In that case, just give permission to more people who have access to read the secrets from. In this case, it's only a service principal account that needs permission to that Key Vault, and you never see that account. But I like having the whole thing integrated in Visual Studio. I don't really see how much would that improve the browser experience, because you open up the browser, you go there, you reveal the secret, and you put it in as needed. I'll show you something else as we go, so that we don't get dragged into that debate too much. And you tell me if that kind of answers your questions along the way. What about secrets rotation? Another question for you, Stan. When someone leaves the company, how long would it take you to rotate the secrets? Or you just let them use it, for the next couple of months?
It's done instantly.
Really? Brilliant. I love that. Can I ask you how you do it?
I let my guys do it. They just do it. Look,
Oh.
I lead a team of 5, so they do whatever they need to get it done.
And
so
they
don't
just
know
rotate
the
the secrets when someone leaves, or are they doing that,
How is it done? It's done through Puppet. I think a lot of it's done through Puppet as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I love it. So you have a couple of options here. You do it on the fly, like you're probably doing as needed. You just press a button and everything happens. The other one is with each deployment. One way or the other, it's totally fine. With each deployment, it can get a bit complicated, and on the fly it has some drawbacks as well. So I'll show you how you do that. So when you have a web application, it's not really that hard to link it up with Key Vault. What do? You go to that web application. So this one, in my case, is DevSecOps 2018, and then I have to go to Manage Service Identity. And if I turn the whole thing on and I save it, that creates a service principal account in Azure Active Directory for me. By the way, who knows what service principal account is? Okay. Let's just put it this way. It's a service account that you can use to log into Azure or do whatever you want with that. And it has a few options of how it operates. Either as you can log in via certificates, or you can use passwords. A few options are there, but the whole thing is like an identity object in Azure that you can do certain things on behalf of the user or on behalf of the application. Does that make sense so far? Let's just put it in there. It's a service account that you're not using. Maybe that will be easier. And that account runs your application. So looking back, if you would be deploying your application to IIS, these days you would use a service account there, right? And it's the same principle up here, just a bit more advanced. So that account actually has to have now permission to read data from Key Vault. So with Key Vault, it's not just that we have RBAC policies applied to that specific resource. You have internal policies, what can certain people do. And all I have to do here, I have to go to that access policy and I have to add that account that I just created via web application. So this is where you find it. You select the principal, it's going to come up as an application. You select that account, and then you select what permission that account will have. So each time you run your website, that website will have permission to read from Key Vault and list all the keys. Okay? So once you do that, it's not really that much that you have to do on your end. Apart from that, you will have to probably dynamically generate any connection strings or things that you need. So this is how you do it, and it's just not the only way. There are many of them, but that's probably the simplest one. You pull down this package from NuGet, and all you have to do is you replace the configuration file. So this is an example for .NET Core. But with that one, you specify that you want to use Key Vault as your config manager, and then if you have to generate connection string, you pull those two secrets down, or as many as needed, and then if someone rotates secrets on the fly for you, let's say that Stan runs the pipeline that's gonna rotate the secrets, your application has to get access to the new secret, and all you have to do in this case is restart or subscribe to an event that something happened there and you want to restart the whole thing. Does that make sense? Okay, reasonably. I reckon you have to see it in action. Things might be better then. But this is in a nutshell what you do. So like rotating secrets on the fly is not hard, even if you rotate secret for a SQL server as part of your ARM deployment. Options are almost limitless. Alrighty. So this is how you actually do the whole rotation. If you're using Key Vault, you just say, I want to create a new version of the secret. That's the secret value. You have to convert it to secure string, and you push it back to Azure once you authenticate it against that account. Easy, easy to do. So the final thing is secret scanner. How many of you accidentally checked in a password or anything like that in the past? I know that you're all lying, because I did it before and I'm pretty sure it happened to you as well. One thing that is really important here is that as it is, there is no such functionality in, maybe it's coming, but there's nothing like that in VSTS or in GitHub that would tell you, oh, whatever you've checked in now is possibly including secrets, and it would prevent you from doing that.
Actually, like GitHub does that.
I've been hearing about that. So the comment was that
I don't really
GitHub
remember, but how it happened. But maybe it was like publish profile or something like that when I published in public repo some of my code, and it was saying like you may expose some
Actually, there's a good comment about this Slack. Slack apparently has a very specific type of API key. It starts with a prefix that no one else is using, and if you check in an API key from Slack in GitHub, in about 15 minutes time you're going to get an email saying that token has been revoked because they felt like it was publicly exposed accidentally. So that's how good they are. So they are scanning GitHub repos on the fly, and if they find their token in there, they're going to revoke it. Now there are a few ways of how you can do the whole thing. Like it's not really hard going to GitHub and say search for that secret access key. There are quite a few people, these are not innocent souls that accidentally checked their stuff in, or maybe they don't care about their environments that much. But doing that, is not hard, and someone can easily, start fooling around with your stuff. A simple solution to that is just put in some, at least regex in place. This is, what I did. It took me 5 minutes to put that regex together, and as you can see, it will find most of the things. It's not really hard to do it. There are probably tools around there that could do a better job, but we're talking about some quick wins here. So what you can do. So if you have that regex in place, all you have to do is you create a build definition somewhere. And on that build definition, in this case I'm going to go with just the classic VSTS kit. It's going to look at all files that are coming in, and then it's going to scan them. So I'm going to start with an empty process, and all I have to do is I have to put some PowerShell in that task. So with that secret scanner, this is my task now. I have to use a script. That script is using exactly the same token as I've showed you before. And when I specify, well, when I set the branch policy on my master branch for that project, this is how I do it. So I go to branch policies on that branch, and then I go to the build validation. So what am I going to do now? That build definition that I created before, that is going to scan my secrets, I'm going to apply that on my branch policy. That means that every time you submit a pull request, it's going to run the build. Okay? And this is how I do it. So I add a policy, I specify that build definition. So you see it's DevSecOps-pull request, the one that I created before. Then I set the trigger, I said that the policy is required, and I say that that immediately expires when master is updated. So I don't want that build to be around for the next X hours, because every single thing that comes in, I want it to do the secret scanning. Okay. So when I do that, I specify the display name and I hit save. And then if you look at the secret scanner, that's the enforced policy now on my master branch. And when I submit something dodgy in there, so in this case what I'm doing, I'm creating a pull request, and that pull request contains token, password, and a few other things. So when I run, hit create, that's going to start off the build. You see here I have secret scanner in progress. And when you run that, you'll see that it will fail. And it fails down here, and it says secret found in file, and it will give you exactly what the token was straight off the bat. And obviously that will prevent the secret from making it to master. The problem is if you're doing it on a public repo, you still kind of expose yourself to someone seeing that branch, but people usually delete those branches very quickly. But master is the one that stays around for quite a while. So how many of you find that useful? Like, doing a quick thing to prevent, secrets from making it? Yeah, that's what I thought, vast majority. Great. Okay, so I'll do a quick summary because we have a lot of things to go through as well. So some quick wins. So add monitoring, make sure that if you're using Azure, you're looking at Azure Security Center. Secure your secrets, try Key Vault, it's an absolutely great solution. Rotate secrets on the fly if you can, and make sure that they don't make it to the repo. So now you kind of understand what the DevSecOps cycle is from one perspective, but where exactly do security advisors fit in? It's really hard to say. Like some people will include them. Actually, one idea that we're toying out with is to use a security advisor, to be present at daily stand-ups, or just have a quick chat with the developers when they're doing some coding. So he warns them about potential threats, like credit card, policies and other things that they have to be aware of. I haven't went exactly really down that path much enough to share more details, but it's definitely something that's on our agenda. So with that, the question is, what could possibly go wrong? We've done quite a lot of things. We have a checklist of what we have to fix. I gave you some quick wins of how you can secure things. So there's not really much around that we can do, is it? Well, the problem is, that whatever you've seen so far can only cover about 10 to 20% of the solution, because that's how much your code actually is in that solution. 80 to 90%, and I dare to say that it's more than 80 to 90, is coming from components like, Docker images, NPM, Bower, you name it, right? There are so many things that you're pulling in. As a matter of fact, let's do something interesting. So when you type in .NET New Angular, what do you think you get? Well, you get about 350 plus NPM packages that contains about 2 million lines of code, a bit more, just by doing that. And I haven't even touched .NET side. It's just, you know, Angular. So when you do when you do .NET, you get 130 plus packages, and that is just the first level expanded, because .NET Core is going to give you .NET All, and that one contains about that many packages. And obviously those packages are using a few more, so it's branched out, and there's a gazillion of code that you get there. And yeah, does anyone feel like, you know, there's something wrong with that? Yeah, there are some smells. Okay, so Costa, what do you think? What do you think is possibly wrong there?
Well, I've heard about many cases when like you use some public like repo in your code, and it just exposes parts of your like it makes holes in your application, like kind of endpoints where like hackers
like this one. So that's what you get with .NET Core, unless you're on the latest version. And it's just a cross-site, you know, request forgery. So if someone wants to exploit it, you know, it's the same problem I think in .NET Framework as well. So they fixed it in .NET Core 2.1.4, but it's there in all previous versions. And who do you think told me about that? No one, exactly. Like no one told you, and that's where the problem is. When you look at, you know, any public components in Java, this is a study that has been done last year, just across, you know, public-facing websites and what JavaScript libraries they were using. And this is what they found out. 87% of those websites that were using handlebars had known vulnerabilities. So they were using a version that had a known vulnerability. And, you know, 37% with jQuery and 40% with Angular. How scary is that? I think it's absolutely, you know, bad. But no one understands that problem, you know, because they're all consuming, we're all consuming, you know, public components. So how do you actually stop that from happening? Actually, I have a question for you. What happens when you Google this? File type :do site equifax.com. Well, if you ask guys from Equifax, they will tell you a disaster. And this is what happened to them. So on March 7th last year, Apache Struts, they released a new version of a known vulnerability that was there. A few days later, some guys started playing, you know, with the idea of, oh, who can possibly, you know, be exposed because of that. Moving forward, you know, towards the end of July, Equifax made a statement that, yeah, they have been hacked and the breach was discovered by them. It took them quite some time, to be honest, because they were exposed probably somewhere between middle of May, according to reports. And during that time, the probation period was happening. So guys had about, like, you know, 2 months before they discovered that, you know, Equifax is actually vulnerable. So it didn't really take them long, you know, to get hacked. And after that period, they were dealing with crisis management. So what do you think that the impact was? Roughly, how many million people? We're talking about millions, obviously. Who thinks it's, you know, 5 million people? No one. What about 10? More. How many more? 20? 300 million. Nah, a bit less, but it was about 145 million people. And that's what the cost was so far. That excludes the second breach, which happened just recently, and all the costs that they were kind of predicting to have to get everything patched. So the number might rise, you know, up to, I don't know how many million more, but it might double easily. But here's the interesting thing, you know, that guy who was about to become the new CIO at the time, he used the confidential information to exercise his vested, you know, Equifax stocks, and he sold the shares just before, you know, they publicly reported the whole thing. So he saved, you know, 120K because of that. Well, poor guy, he thought he would save it, you know, he got prosecuted afterwards, but anyway. It's really interesting, you know, what people do when these things happen.
What happened to him?
I just, you know, briefly read the story. It didn't go much in detail, but yeah, he was prosecuted. Here's another one. They are an absolute champion when it comes to, you know, exposing your data. This is the second one, actually. The first one was 3 billion people. That's how many accounts got exposed. This time it was only 500, but they've lost $350 million because of that. So I wouldn't really say, you know, that they lost it in terms of, like, you know, revenue or anything like that. But at the time, they were about to be acquired by Verizon, and I think that the number was getting towards $5 billion. And soon after that, you know, they got acquired for like 350 less. So that's how much they've lost. Not them, probably, you know, but those who had their shares. A few more. So here's an example from 2013. Target got hacked. So, you know, Target is quite popular in the US. And especially around that period, you know, between the Thanksgiving Day and Christmas, that's exactly where that happened. And I think they were planning that attack for about 6 months, according to some sources that I know. But what they've done in that period, they've stole about 40 million credit cards. And the breach actually cost Target about $300 million. So yeah, when you think about, you know, component governance, which is the next thing that I'm going to touch, it's really important that you understand what is actually in your solution. And there are a few ways of how we can actually do that. So let's have a look, you know, at a development perspective and, you know, what our CI/CD pipeline is. So we have a public package repository somewhere, NuGet, NPM, whatever. We have source control, right? Build and release somewhere in place. And that's kind of the pipeline everyone would use. So here's a picture of what everyone would probably be using these days. Who's using that? A few. I'm surprised people got shy or tired. Yeah? Okay, great. So what's the problem with that pipeline? Well, let's try something else. If we have a public package repository, you know, we don't really know what's happening there because we're pulling in whatever is up there in the open wild. What if we had a private package repository, something that would, you know, do some scanning on the stuff that's coming in and only let us use things that are safe? Okay? And the rest doesn't really change much except if you want to do some penetration testing. But, you know, these are just the ideas of what you can do with your website. So the major component that I'm bringing in is the private repository in here that is going to give me some feedback about the stuff that I'm using and whether that stuff is safe or not. And obviously it's going to block bad stuff from coming in. Who finds that useful? Yeah? A few. I'm surprised. Apparently you have, you know, deep wallets like other guys. But what I really care about is trusted components. I really want to have stuff that is safe in there, and I can't really say it's going to be 100% secure, but, you know, at least I want to understand what I'm using and how can I, you know, mitigate those risks. So this is what one of the products, you know, that we're exploring this stage. It's called Sonatype Nexus Firewall. This is what it does. So I can, you know, hook it up with any public package repository, NPM, Maven, NuGet, you name it, right? They cover a lot of stuff. And what they do, they scan all the packages that are there. Actually, I can specify, you know, what's the whitelisted thing. But they have, you know, fingerprints of all those packages, the versions. They know what vulnerabilities are there. They know what licenses are in use. That's a topic probably for another day. But I'll give you just a quick explanation. So when you use an open source package, it comes with a license, you know, and as part of a license, you might have to state what you're using on your website. So by doing that, you're pretty much saying to hackers, hey, I'm using this, this package, and they will go like, oh, what are the known vulnerabilities in those packages? Bam, and they got you, straight off the bat. So let's try to see if we can make this a bit better. So we have that public package repository. Now we blocked the bad stuff from coming in. What if we reject the pull requests? So this is what you've seen before. Just do something simple there so that the secrets don't make it into your source code. On build, enforce policies, put in some static analysis, you know, what's happening with code and so forth. And same thing on release, you know, just do some monitoring and penetration testing and other things. There are tools out there like, you know, you can easily add Qualys scanner to your release. So when you deploy the whole website, you just run the scan against your website, and if it comes back with a bad report, you can just say, oh, I'm not going to, you know, deploy that thing. You know, I'm not going to do VIP swapping or whatever. It's up to you what you want to do. So this is what this pipeline would look like. I would still have that early feedback that would come from before. I would block the bad stuff. I would do some policy enforcements on the build. So, you know, in terms of like, I don't allow any changes from coming in. I would do some policy enforcements on deploy, monitoring in production, and do some static analysis and runtime testing on both ends. Okay? It's a quite, you know, comprehensive pipeline. The problem is that it's not really cheap. So it's very expensive. What tools do we have in that space? So we know that to get there, we have to put some package scanner in place. And these are the options that you have. There are a gazillion of them. The three main ones that I'm looking into are Sonatype Nexus, Veracode, and White Source Bolt. They all look pretty appealing. I'm actually surprised that Microsoft doesn't have any good solution in that space, and I'm really hoping that they will come up with something because they are a bit behind there. And it would be nice to see the whole thing integrated in VSDS. That's kind of one of the last bits that I'm missing in that space. Is there a question?
Yeah, are there any like free tools or?
Oh no. So the question was, are they free? I'll say it's a nice dream. Okay, we're talking about 20 to 50K per year. That's how much they cost, roughly. If you consider, you know, how much they save you potentially if you're safer because of that. It's almost like insurance policy, right? It's totally worth the money. You know, not everyone can afford that. You know, small teams probably less than, you know, enterprise businesses, but it's something that everyone should be looking into. And I'm pretty sure, you know, that I know that White Source, they have something, a model that is kind of affordable for something like small teams. Sonatype is a bit more complex. They want you to pre-purchase like 100 licenses, but you know, at the end of the day, it comes down to conversation. So if you want to call them, they might, you know, have a better solution for you. This is, you know, just an example of what you get. So look at this package here. So it's just a simple artifact, but this is what Sonatype will give me. I can see, you know, what security risks that I have in that package, and it shows me on what version am I at the moment, and it tells me that this version down here is actually the one that, you know, doesn't have that vulnerability in there. You don't have this today. How many of you see that? No one. But when you look at this one, I could easily say, okay, I want to set a policy that I can only use packages that, you know, security risk is lower than 5 or something like that, and block everything else. And that's how, if I ran that on build, my build would fail because it wouldn't allow me to use a package that I'm having in there. Now obviously there is a different problem, you know, in terms of package management, because a lot of people prefer to stay on the current version, being afraid of, you know, jumping on the latest version because that might possibly break their code. Okay, it's up to you how you want to control the whole thing. There are many ways of how to skin a cat, but I would be trying to enforce this policy everywhere possible, just to see, you know, how much can we actually really break. And obviously, if that breaks a lot of, you know, development, well, if that breaks the development cycle, you can obviously make the whole thing just, you know, informative. So each time you run a build, it will tell you this is what you have in there, and that makes you aware that you have problems that you have to mitigate along the way. Not necessarily now, but, you know, at some point. A few other you know, products. There's software composition analysis from Veracode. It's very similar. Like, you know, you see what are the vulnerabilities in there. You can drill into those. All those, you know, package managers, they are capable of, you know, scanning not just packages, but, you know, even your code. A part that I didn't even touch today is how you do dynamic penetration testing of your own code and a few other things. It's a topic for itself. Maybe another day. Here's an example of white source. Same thing, just a different product. Again, a scanner of the packages and so forth. And this is the integration with VSTS. So I kind of like white source because of that. Because it's just easy. You just drag and drop tasks in VSTS pipeline and off you go. It does everything for you. So having said that, do you feel that this covered everything you need to know about security in terms of development practices? Well, I'll put it this way. It's great to know what's happening in components. They are just not a bit too late, but you know, the awareness about component governance is a bit too late to the market, because these days a lot of guys would be using containers, right? Who's using containers? Half the room, there we go. And I reckon that number will double in a year's time. So talking about containers, you know, we bring totally new set of problems in there, because in container you can load whatever, you know, information you want. You can create a Nginx. Well, you create a container based on Nginx. So Nginx is an open source component coming from somewhere else. And how do you know what version, you know, a bug was in there unless you have a scanner for containers? The process itself is not much different from what we have for components in terms of web software development or any other development. You have a CI/CD pipeline somewhere, and then you ship that container to a registry. It doesn't matter what you use. You can use Docker registry, you can use Azure Container Registry, up to you. And then you have something like Aquasec cyber intelligence that scans your containers in there, and it's going to look into what vulnerabilities you have in those containers. So all of a sudden, the app that you deployed in there might be in a container that is actually, you know, even if you have super secure application, your container is now exposed, so you have a different problem. And this is what those tools will do for you. So this is an example of how you would do it with Azure. You can use any container registry you want. You have a CI/CD pipeline. They provide you VSTS tasks, and you just specify where's your Aqua command center, a generic endpoint, and this is going to go. So in the CI/CD pipeline, as you actually build your image and you push it in a container in a registry, it's going to run the scan on that registry by itself. There are again a gazillion of scanners out there. I'll just name a few ones that I really care about. Aquasec Container Security Platform, I had a feeling that this is kind of recommended by Microsoft. Same thing for Twistlock. So this one and this guy down here. And again, there are others, you know, that are in that space that are capable of doing that functionality. So I'll just show you a few of them. So this is Docker Cloud scanner. I think it comes only with enterprise version. I don't know how much that costs, but you can get an idea of how it works. So when you push in an image, it's gonna, you know, run a scan, and then you're gonna see, you know, how bad that image is. Okay, and then you just drill down into the whole thing. I'm gonna do a deep dive session in a few months' time when I explore all those tools, and I'm gonna come back, you know, with more details of how exactly the whole thing works. This is an example of Aquasec Container Security Platform. As you can see, I have an image scan, and it will tell me it passed the malware, but the vulnerability severity is actually rejected, and, you know, there are other things in there that are not supposed to be. Okay. A few others, like, you know, this is StackRox, Tenable Flow Check. They, in principle, they all work the same, just, you know, different UI to say. So having said that, we covered, you know, components, we covered containers, but we're still exposed on the platform side. And as developers, you know, if you look at the journey of what where we came from as developers, and we care about security now a lot, and we're taking on a lot of, you know, ops practices. So for people, you know, who are not doing PaaS, platform as a service, they would probably still have some VMs and not containers there. How do you actually, you know, provision their pipeline in a very secure way? So with Azure, if you're doing infrastructure as code and you build your virtual machines on the fly, you can kind of enforce the process by using the Secure DevOps Kit for Azure. It's a simple set of components, and they come through as a VSTS task. All you have to do is really, specify a few parameters. So that's the task that you have to add to your pipeline. Specify what resource group name you're using, subscription, and then you can say, okay, log the whole thing to OMS. Okay, OMS is just log analytics that you can run across the entire Azure and run some solutions on that and see what's happening. So by doing that, you will get back a nice report saying what security checks your deployment passed and what it failed and so forth. So I think this brings me towards the end of the session. How many guys find that useful? What they've seen in terms of component governance and security checks and so forth. Alrighty. Like I said, I'll be doing a deep dive session in a few months' time. Please come for that user group again. And thanks for coming tonight.